The world had fallen apart. No one could say exactly how or why it happened. One moment, everything was as it had always been. People going about their lives, cities bustling with energy, the internet alive with information. Then, in the blink of an eye, things changed. Mysterious forces appeared in the skies, strange lights danced over the cities, and one by one, the lights of civilization went out. Electricity stopped working. Phones and computers went dead. Cars refused to start, and the once bustling streets became eerily silent. Governments collapsed, and cities fell into ruins. The world was on the brink of an apocalypse, but no one knew what was causing it or how to stop it. Jake Taylor had been just another guy living in the city before all of this. He was in his mid-20s, a regular office worker with a love for karaoke on the weekends. When the world changed, he didn't know what to do. His apartment, a small and modest place, became his new refuge. The streets outside were dark and empty, the hum of modern life replaced by an unsettling quiet. It was on one of these nights, when the world seemed to hold its breath, that Jake found himself wandering the city, unsure of where to go or what to do. He had been to the karaoke bar many times before. It had always been his escape, the one place where he could let loose and forget about the world for a while. But tonight, the city was different, strange, eerie, and almost alive. Walking past the broken streets and abandoned buildings, Jake spotted a neon sign flickering in the distance. It was the karaoke bar he knew so well, but now it looked almost out of place, glowing brightly against the decay around it. Without thinking, he found himself heading toward it, his feet carrying him forward, as if drawn by some invisible force. When he entered the bar, he was greeted by the warm light and familiar sounds of music. But it was different. The air felt charged, like something was about to happen. The usual crowd was gone, and only a few people lingered by the bar, sipping on drinks in silence. Behind the counter stood Elena, the bar's owner. She looked as calm as ever, her dark eyes studying Jake as he walked in. "Jake," she said with a nod. "You're back." He hadn't realized it, but somehow, she had always known when he would show up. Elena had a way of seeing things that others didn't, and tonight, it was no different. "I didn't think anyone would be here," Jake said, his voice sounding strange even to him. The world outside felt so desolate. But here, inside this little bar, it felt almost like things hadn't changed.
"There are still some of us who need the music," Elena replied, her tone soft but serious.
"You always did know how to find your way here, didn't you?" Jake shrugged. "I don't know. I guess I wanted to sing." Elena smiled faintly. "There's more to your singing than you think." Jake wasn't sure what she meant, but before he could ask, she turned toward the karaoke machine at the far end of the room.
"Go on," she said. "Pick a song."
You never know when the world will end, but it's always good to sing while you can. Jake hesitated. He had never thought of himself as a great singer, just someone who liked to have fun with it. But there was something about the way Elena spoke that made him feel like tonight was different. He stepped up to the machine, scanned through the list of songs, and picked a classic, a song he had sung many times before. But somehow, tonight, it felt important. As the music started, Jake took a deep breath. He wasn't sure what was about to happen, but he let the words flow. The lyrics filled the room, and for a moment it felt like the chaos outside had disappeared. The world, for just a few minutes, felt like it was back to normal. The simple joy of singing took over his mind, and he sang louder, his voice carrying through the empty bar. But then, something strange happened. As Jake hit a high note, the room seemed to freeze. The music stopped. The lights flickered and dimmed. For a moment, everything was silent, as if the entire world had paused. Jake stopped singing, his heart racing. He glanced around, confused. The bar was still, the air thick with tension. Elena's gaze was fixed on him, her expression unreadable. She seemed to be waiting for something. What was that? Jake asked, his voice shaking. Elena stepped forward slowly, her eyes never leaving his. That was you, Jake. You've always had it in you. What? Jake couldn't make sense of her words.
What do you mean? Your voice, she explained, her voice low and steady. When you sing, it doesn't just affect the music.
It affects everything around you. The world, the very fabric of time itself responds to your voice. Jake blinked, trying to process what she was saying. Are you saying I have some sort of power? That my singing can change the world? Elena nodded slowly. Yes, but not just any power. What you just did, it was the beginning. Your voice has the ability to freeze time, to bend reality. And the reason you've been drawn here tonight is because the world needs you. The apocalypse, the destruction you see outside, is not natural. It was caused by something or someone. And now only you have the ability to stop it.
Jake's mind was racing. He had always loved karaoke, but this?
He had never even imagined anything like this. How could he, an ordinary guy, have the power to stop the end of the world with nothing but his voice? Who caused all of this? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. That's a story for another time, Elena said, her tone serious. But you need to understand something, Jake. The destruction outside, the singularity, it's coming for us all. The world is on the brink of collapse, and your singing may be the only thing that can save us. Jake stood there, trying to process everything. His mind felt overloaded, as if the weight of the world had been suddenly thrust upon him. He wasn't a hero. He was just a guy who liked to sing at a karaoke bar on the weekends. How was he supposed to stop an apocalypse with a song? But Elena's gaze never wavered. She believed in him, and there was something in her eyes that made Jake feel like maybe, just maybe, he was the one meant to do this. Start singing again, Elena said, her voice gentle. The more you sing, the more you'll understand your power. It's time for you to find out what you're really capable of. Jake didn't know if he was ready for this. He didn't know if he could stop the end of the world, but he knew one thing for sure. He had to try. He took a deep breath, and as the music began once again, he sang. This time, though, he wasn't just singing for fun. This time, his voice held a deeper meaning, a purpose. The fate of the world rested in his hands, and as his voice echoed through the bar, something changed. The air shifted, the lights flickered back on, and for the first time in what felt like forever, the world outside seemed just a little less dark. Jake didn't know what would happen next, but one thing was certain. This was only the beginning. The world outside was still falling apart. The skies, once a brilliant blue, were now a dull gray, swirling with strange clouds. The cities lay in ruins, and humanity had been left struggling to survive amidst the chaos. It felt like an eternity had passed since the lights went out, and yet, everything still felt like it was on the edge of destruction. But inside the karaoke bar, things were oddly calm. Jake Taylor stood at the center of it, still processing the strange events of the night before. He couldn't get Elena's words out of his mind. Your voice has the ability to freeze time, to bend reality. Every time he thought about it, his head spun. It was hard to believe, but the more he thought about what happened, the more he realized there was something different about him. His singing hadn't just stopped the music, it had stopped the world. But why him? Why was he the one who had this power? Jake was just a regular guy who loved to sing at a bar. He wasn't some chosen hero. Elena had told him that the apocalypse wasn't just some random event. It had been caused by something, or someone. She had said it was connected to the singularity. He didn't know what that meant, but he could feel the weight of it in his chest. The singularity were the beings responsible for the chaos, and their forces were closing in on Earth. They were coming for him. They were coming for humanity. That night, after the strange freezing moment in the bar, Jake couldn't sleep. He lay awake in his small apartment, staring at the cracked ceiling, wondering how he could be the one to stop it all. He wasn't a soldier or a scientist. He wasn't even a trained singer. All he had was his voice, and somehow it was powerful enough to change the world. But how could something as simple as karaoke save the Earth? The next morning, Jake decided to go back to the bar. There was something in his gut telling him that he needed to understand more about this power. He didn't know where to start, but he knew Elena might have some answers. When he walked into the bar, he found Elena sitting at the counter sipping a cup of coffee. Her eyes were tired, but there was a quiet determination in her face. She looked up as he entered and gave him a small smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes.
Jake? She said, setting the coffee down.
I knew you'd be back. Jake took a seat next to her. I don't understand any of this. What's happening to me? Why is my voice doing these things? Elena sighed deeply, staring at the cup in her hands for a moment before answering.
It's not just your voice, Jake. It's the power of music itself.
You don't realize it, but your voice is connected to something much bigger than you. The singularity didn't just cause the apocalypse. They're trying to rewrite reality. They've done it before, on other worlds, and now they've come for Earth. Jake frowned. Rewrite reality? How? Elena took a deep breath, her voice steady but filled with a sadness that Jake couldn't understand. The singularity believed that the universe is just a collection of notes, sounds, vibrations, and frequencies. They can control everything by manipulating those frequencies, and that's how they bring about destruction. But they've underestimated something. The one thing they didn't account for was humanity's music. Music has a power they don't understand. Your voice, Jake, is part of that. It's more than just a song. It's a force of creation. If you can learn to use it, you can stop the singularity. Jake's head was spinning. Wait, are you saying that my singing can fight these...
Things? The singularity? Yes, but it's not going to be easy. You're just beginning to understand your abilities.
The more you sing, the stronger you'll become. But you'll need help, Jake. Jake was silent for a moment, thinking about everything she had just told him. The fate of the world rested on his shoulders, and he had no idea what to do next. He didn't even know how to control this strange power that had awakened inside of him. I don't know if I'm ready for this, he said finally. I'm just a guy who likes to sing karaoke. You're more than that, Elena replied softly. You just don't know it yet.
The world needs you, Jake. Your voice is the key to stopping the singularity.
Before Jake could respond, the door to the bar swung open, and a figure stepped inside. It was a man, tall and broad-shouldered, with a rugged look. His face was scarred, and he wore a jacket that looked like it had seen better days. He scanned the room and locked eyes with Elena. Elena, the man said, his voice rough. We need to talk. Elena stood up and walked toward him, motioning for Jake to stay where he was. She spoke quietly to the man for a moment, then turned back to Jake. Jake, this is Marcus.
He's part of a group that's been fighting the singularity. He's here because we need your help.
Jake stood up, still confused. Help? What do you mean? Marcus stepped forward, his eyes scanning Jake's face. We've been tracking the singularity's movements.
They're getting closer, and they know about you. We think they're trying to stop you before you can fully understand your power.
Jake's heart raced. Why would they want to stop me? Marcus gave a grim smile.
Because your voice can undo everything they've done. They can't allow that.
If you learned to control your power, you could destroy them. Jake felt a wave of uncertainty wash over him. He had always been an ordinary guy, nothing special. But now it seemed like the whole world was depending on him, and he didn't even know where to begin. He felt small, insignificant.
I don't know if I can do this,
Jake said, his voice shaky. Elena stepped closer to him, her expression kind but firm. Jake, you already have everything you need. You just need to believe in yourself. The power is inside of you. Marcus nodded in agreement. You're not alone in this, Jake. We'll help you. But first, you need to come with us. We've found a safe place where you can practice and learn to control your voice. Jake looked between them. The fear in his chest was real, but so was something else. A small spark of hope. He wasn't just an observer anymore. He was a part of something bigger. Maybe, just maybe, he could make a difference. He nodded slowly. Okay, I'll go with you. That night, Jake found himself in a small, hidden camp on the outskirts of the ruined city. The camp was made up of survivors, a group of people who had banded together to fight back against the singularity. They had their own methods, their own weapons, but none of it was enough to stop the force that was closing in on them. They were relying on Jake, hoping that his voice would be the key to their survival. As Jake stood in the center of the camp, surrounded by these strangers who had put their trust in him, he couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't ready. He wasn't the hero they thought he was. But there was no turning back now. The apocalypse was real, and it was coming for them all. If he didn't figure out how to control this power, they were all doomed. Elena and Marcus were there, watching him closely. Elena had explained that Jake needed to practice singing, that he needed to learn how to focus his energy and use it to fight back. She had given him a song to start with, an old familiar tune that Jake had sung many times before. But this time, it wasn't just about hitting the right notes, it was about something deeper. He took a deep breath and stepped up to the makeshift stage they had set up. The others gathered around, their eyes fixed on him. For a moment, everything felt silent. The weight of the world pressed down on him. As the music started, Jake opened his mouth and began to sing. The words came easily, but this time, something felt different. He could feel the energy building inside him, a warmth that spread through his chest and into his arms. He sang louder, and the air around him seemed to respond. The music filled the space, and as he hit the high note, something amazing happened. The world seemed to pause, time slowed. The camp around him, the people listening, all of it froze. Jake stood there, his voice echoing in the stillness. He didn't know how he did it, but he could feel the power coursing through him. When the music stopped, the world returned to normal. The people around him blinked, as if waking from a dream. Elena and Marcus looked at him, their faces filled with astonishment. "That was it," Elena whispered. "You've done it." Jake's heart was pounding. He had no idea how he had done it, but he knew one thing for sure. He had just taken the first step toward stopping the apocalypse, and he wasn't going to stop until it was over. Jake had spent weeks in the hidden camp, practicing his singing. He had come to realize that the power inside him wasn't just about hitting the right notes. It was about intention. The world around him responded to his voice in ways he couldn't fully understand. When he sang, reality bent to his will. Time slowed, the air seemed to shift, and the ground beneath his feet hummed with a strange energy. But despite all the progress, Jake still didn't feel ready. The apocalypse was still coming, and he had no idea how to use his power to stop it. Elena and Marcus were patient with him, always encouraging him to sing more, to practice harder, to connect with the music. They explained that his voice was the key to stopping the singularity, the beings responsible for the destruction of the world. But with each passing day, Jake's anxiety grew. The singularity were getting closer, and he wasn't sure if he was strong enough to face them. One night, after a long day of practice, Jake sat on the edge of the campfire staring into the flames. The others were resting, but he couldn't sleep. His mind was racing. He had come a long way since that first night in the karaoke bar, but the weight of the world still pressed down on him. How could he be the one to save everyone?
He wasn't a hero. He was just a guy who loved singing at a bar.
How had he ended up here, in the middle of this strange and dangerous world? Elena was right, he whispered to himself. I'm not ready. As the fire crackled beside him, he heard a sound in the distance. It was faint at first, but as it grew louder, he realized it was music.
The notes were unfamiliar, strange, and haunting. Jake stood up and turned toward the sound.
It was coming from beyond the camp, from the direction of the ruined city. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. He had no idea what it was, but something in the music made his chest tighten. Without thinking, Jake started walking toward the sound. It wasn't like him to go off alone, but something was pulling him toward it. As he moved closer, the music grew louder, more distinct. He recognized the melody now. A song he had heard once, long ago. But this version was different. It was darker, more powerful. And as the music reached its peak, a strange feeling washed over him, a feeling of dread. When he reached the source of the music, he saw something that made his blood run cold. The singularity had arrived. Their presence was unmistakable. A group of dark figures stood in the middle of the abandoned street, their bodies flickering in and out of existence like shadows. They were chanting, their voices blending with the haunting melody of the song. Jake's heart raced. He had known the singularity were coming, but seeing them in person, hearing their music, he realized just how powerful they were. This wasn't just an enemy, it was an ancient force, capable of manipulating the very fabric of existence. And they had come to claim the world as their own. Before Jake could move, one of the figures turned toward him. The air around them seemed to warp, and Jake felt a wave of energy hit him like a physical blow. His legs gave out, and he collapsed to the ground. The music stopped, and the Singularity's leader stepped forward. "You've come a long way, human," the figure said, their voice echoing in Jake's mind. "But your power is no match for ours." Jake tried to stand, but his body felt heavy, as if something was pulling him down. He struggled to focus, but the leader's presence was overwhelming.
"You can't stop us," the figure continued. "Your voice is a mere echo of what we can do."
"You can sing all you want, but in the end, you are nothing."
Jake gritted his teeth.
"I'm not done yet."
The Singularity leader laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "You're already too late. The world is ours. And your music?"
"It's just a distraction." With those words, the leader raised their hand and the air around Jake rippled.
He felt his strength draining, as if his very essence was being pulled from him. But even as he struggled, he felt something inside him stir. A spark, a flame, a feeling of defiance. He wasn't going to let them win. Not like this. Summoning all the strength he had left, Jake stood up. His legs shook, but he refused to fall. He didn't know how he was doing it, but he was. His voice was all he had, and he would use it to fight back. The music in his mind started again, soft at first, but it grew stronger as he began to sing. The notes were shaky at first, uncertain, but as he sang, the energy around him shifted. His voice started to resonate with something deeper, something primal. The ground beneath his feet trembled, and the figures in front of him faltered. The leader's smile faded, replaced by a look of anger. "What is this?" they demanded. Jake didn't answer. He just sang, louder this time, more determined. He wasn't sure what was happening, but he could feel it. The power in his voice was real. It was more than just music. It was a force of nature, a force that could shape reality itself. As he sang, the air around him began to crackle with energy. The Singularity figures wavered, their forms flickering like images on a broken screen. Jake pushed harder, his voice rising in intensity. The figures stumbled back, their hold on reality weakening. He had no idea how he was doing it, but he was doing it. His music was pushing them back. The leader took a step forward, their hand raised to strike, but Jake was faster. With one final note, a powerful, soul-shaking cry, Jake unleashed everything he had. The force of his voice slammed into the singularity, shattering their presence like glass. The figures exploded in a burst of light, their forms disintegrating into nothingness. The world around Jake seemed to shift and warp, and for a moment, he thought he might be losing control. But then, everything stilled. The air cleared and the haunting music stopped. The singularity were gone. Jake collapsed to his knees, breathing heavily. His body felt drained, his throat raw from the effort. But as the adrenaline wore off, a strange sense of peace washed over him. He had done it. He had fought back, and he had won. For now. But the battle wasn't over. He knew that. The singularity were still out there, still watching, and Jake had a feeling this was only the beginning. When he stood up and turned back toward the camp, Elena and Marcus were waiting for him.
Their faces were filled with a mix of relief and awe.
"You did it," Marcus said, his voice filled with disbelief. "You actually did it." Elena stepped forward, her expression softer now. "Jake, you've come so far. You've shown us all what you're capable of." Jake shook his head, still trying to process everything.
It's not over, he said quietly. The singularity will be back. They'll be stronger next time.
Elena nodded.
I know, but we've seen what you can do now, Jake.
We know you're ready. And we'll be here, fighting with you. Jake looked out into the distance, his thoughts swirling. He wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was clear. He wasn't going to stop fighting. He had a purpose now, a reason to keep going. The world needed him, and he wasn't going to let it fall. He took a deep breath and nodded.
Let's finish this.
The battle had been won, but Jake knew deep down that the war was far from over. The singularity had been pushed back, their dark forms obliterated by his voice, but that wasn't enough. He could feel the weight of what was coming. The force he had tapped into was powerful, but it was raw, untamed. He was only beginning to understand how much of the world could change with a single note. Days passed in the hidden camp as Jake continued to practice. Elena and Marcus stayed by his side, offering guidance and support. The other survivors, those who had remained after the initial wave of destruction, watched him closely. He had become their symbol of hope, the person who had stood up against the impossible and won. But Jake wasn't sure he deserved their faith. He felt more like an imposter, a guy who just got lucky once. He hadn't even fully figured out how his voice worked. He couldn't afford to make mistakes. The singularity were still out there, and he was the only one who could stop them. One evening, as Jake was finishing his latest practice session, Elena approached him, her face serious. "Jake, we need to talk." Jake wiped the sweat from his forehead, looking up at her. "What's wrong?" "There's something you need to understand about the singularity," she began, her voice heavy. "What you've seen so far is just a fraction of their power. They are not just invaders. They are reality itself. They are not limited to this world. They can reach across dimensions, bend the laws of time and space. What they did to the Earth was only the beginning." Jake listened intently, his heart sinking with every word. "The apocalypse you've seen, the destruction, it was all designed to weaken humanity, to break us. They believe the universe is a symphony, and they are the composers. They've done this to countless worlds before. They reshape reality, one world at a time, until it becomes nothing but an empty echo of what it once was."
Jake shook his head, his mind racing. But why? Why Earth? Because Earth is different. Humanity is different, Elena replied. Your voice, Jake. It's something they've never encountered before. It's an anomaly. The singularity has been trying to erase that anomaly, to eliminate the potential that humans have to change the very fabric of existence.
They don't understand it, and that's why they fear you. Jake swallowed hard, trying to absorb the weight of her words.
The fate of the entire world, of every living thing, rested on his shoulders. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for the very essence of humanity itself.
We don't have much time,
Marcus added, his voice grave. The singularity are regrouping. They're going to come for you again. This time, they won't be so easily defeated. Jake clenched his fists.
What do I do? Elena stepped forward, her eyes meeting his. You need to learn to control your power, Jake.
You need to stop relying on raw emotion. Your voice is the key. But it's not just about singing. It's about understanding the energy behind it. You need to tap into something deeper, something more focused. Jake nodded, though doubt still lingered in the back of his mind. How could he possibly control something so vast, so unpredictable? He was just a guy who loved singing, not a savior. But if there was one thing he had learned, it was that he didn't have a choice. The next few days were intense. Elena guided him through the process of refining his control, helping him channel his energy into each note. It wasn't easy. Every time Jake thought he had a breakthrough, something would go wrong. His voice would crack, or the world around him would warp uncontrollably. It was frustrating, and Jake found himself questioning if he was capable of mastering it. But every time he faltered, Elena was there to encourage him.
You're getting closer, she would say. Every time you sing, you get a little bit closer to understanding your power. It wasn't until one evening, as the sun began to set and the air grew cooler, that Jake felt a change.
He stood alone in the center of the camp, facing the horizon. The weight of the world hung heavily in the air. But this time, he felt different. The music inside him, the energy he had struggled to control for so long, was more in sync. He could feel the vibrations in his chest, the power of his voice ready to surge. He opened his mouth, and a single note filled the air. It was steady, controlled. He felt the music wrap around him, the sound flowing through his body, through the very ground beneath him. The air shimmered with energy, and for the first time, Jake knew that he wasn't just singing. He was shaping reality itself. The power wasn't outside of him, it was inside, waiting to be unleashed. The note stretched, bending the air, and Jake held it steady, focusing all his energy into the sound. The world around him rippled, the very fabric of reality quivering. It was as if the universe was listening to him, responding to the frequencies of his voice. The sensation was exhilarating and terrifying at the same time. He could feel the potential for destruction, but he also felt the possibility for creation. When the note finally faded, Jake stood there, breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling with the force of the experience. He had done it. He had finally learned to control the power. Elena and Marcus had been watching from a distance. They walked toward him, their expressions filled with awe.
That was incredible, Marcus said, his voice full of respect.
You've finally done it. Jake didn't respond right away. He was still trying to process what had just happened. The power was so much greater than he had imagined. But it wasn't enough. He knew that. He couldn't stop now.
We need to go, Elena said, her voice urgent. The singularity is coming.
This is it, Jake, the final battle.
Jake nodded, determination flooding his chest. He had trained long enough. Now, it was time to face the enemy. The final showdown took place in the ruins of what had once been a thriving city. The air was thick with dust, the remnants of buildings casting long shadows on the ground. The sky above was dark, swirling with strange clouds that seemed to pulse with energy. The singularity had arrived, their forms shifting in and out of existence like shadows, their music filling the air. Jake stood at the center of the battlefield, his heart pounding in his chest. He was ready. He could feel the energy in his bones, the power of his voice ready to erupt. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for the future of humanity. Elena and Marcus stood by his side. The other survivors gathered behind them. They were ready, too. They had fought for so long. And now, they were putting their trust in Jake. The world was depending on him. The leader of the Singularity stepped forward, their voice echoing in Jake's mind. "You are still nothing, human. Your music cannot stop us. You are just a brief fleeting sound in the vast symphony of the universe. We are the composers."
We are the masters of reality. Jake took a deep breath, focusing on the power inside him.
He wasn't afraid anymore. The Singularity could manipulate reality, but he had something they didn't. The heart of humanity. The power of song. The power of hope. With a fierce determination, Jake stepped forward and began to sing. His voice was steady, controlled. The air around him began to vibrate with energy. The ground beneath him trembling. The world responded to his voice, the very fabric of reality bending to his will. The Singularity's forms wavered, flickering like images on a broken screen. Jake pushed harder, his voice rising, filling the air with the strength of his will. The Singularity leader tried to counter, their own music clashing with Jake's, but it wasn't enough. Jake's voice tore through their reality, shattering their hold on the world. With every note, the Singularity's power weakened. The final note rang out, a powerful, soul-shaking sound that reverberated through the very fabric of the universe. The Singularity leader screamed, their form breaking apart, dissolving into nothingness. And just like that, it was over. The world around Jake shifted, the oppressive energy lifting. The dark clouds began to dissipate, and the sky cleared. The ground beneath him stopped trembling. The Singularity were gone. Jake stood there, breathing heavily, his chest heaving with exhaustion. But he had done it. He had saved the world. The survivors cheered, their voices rising in celebration. Jake turned to Elena and Marcus, a smile spreading across his face. He had done it. He had booped the apocalypse.